Welcome to week 3. So, a good job getting through these first couple of weeks, guys. I think that everybody is off to a really good start, and we are certainly having some great discussions about history. So this week we look at the rise of fascism. Oh, that's hard to say, and dictators in Europe. And it's really not just in Europe. We see the main concentration of them there because we have Hitler in Germany, Mussolini in Italy, we have Stalin in Russia, and then we also have Franco in Spain, as well as that we have General Tojo over in Japan. So, Japan was really big on wanting to end Western influence and imperialism. And, they all had those ideas of world domination. All right. So, before we get into let's just do a little housekeeping like we do each week. So, this week we have our discussion on fascism. And remember, guys, you just need 2 posts each week. You need your initial post that's due on Wednesday, and then you have until Sunday to get in your one participation post. Because of the COVID-19, we have changed those requirements. So, we couldn't change that in the course shell. So, you guys will still see that it says to participation posts, but just note that you only need one for a total of 2 each week. So just 2 each week. Okay, guys. And then you have your case study this week where you will pick um, either looking at Hitler, Mussolini, or Tojo in Japan and talk about their rise of fascism. And then we have our topic selection assignment, and then just a note on that grading. Please note that your discussion grades will always be posted no later than midnight on Tuesdays, and the case study and those topic selections, those will be posted no later than midnight on Friday. So that's how it always works each week, guys. So discussions on Tuesdays, the other assignments are always no later than Friday. And I will always post announcements in class so that you guys are aware of those, that feedback and those grades are in the grade book for you there. Okay. Make sure that you are including support in the form of citations and references for all of your work. So, make sure that you have that reference listed at the end, and then you have some kind of in-text citation that matches that reference too. So for every reference, you want to have an in-text citation for it. And then on that note, no matter how many in-text citations you cite the textbook, you only put that once on the reference page there. Give me just a minute, guys. I think my goats broke out, and make sure they don't run down to the road. Sorry. So, in this week, in looking at fascism, we have to remember some of those kind of that main rhetoric that these men, these dictators came into power. Espousing, I guess, is the best way to say that. So, when it comes to Germany, we know that anti-Semitism, that was one of the main rhetorics used by the Nazi Party, and they pretty much devastated well, not pretty much, they exactly devastated the Jewish community in Europe. And along with that, too, we have to remember that it wasn't just the Jewish community that suffered under Nazi policies. Yes, they were the ones most hard hit, but we also have anybody of that ideal Aryan ideal that the Nazi Party had. Anybody that was against, the Nazi Party, they were considered to be kind of this other. They were considered to be not human, soulless, and so that made it easy then for the atrocities that occurred to these people, the acts of violence that occurred to these people to happen, because when you desensitize people and you separate people into these groups of us and them, and you demonize that other group, then it makes it easy for people to to take the negative things inside of themselves and put it on to others. So in addition to the Jewish culture, we also have homosexuals, black, anybody that just Asians, anybody living in Europe that was not, that typical Aryan German bloodline, Bolsheviks, communists, Catholics, people that were mentally and physically disabled, all of these groups were rounded. And then, just like I said, anybody that would be considered a dissenter were rounded up and treated poorly, put in these concentration camps. And so, we also see with along with these ideas of just desensitizing people and how our hate and anger and those negative things inside of us as human beings can manifest itself and into our treatment of others. We also see um, we really see a lot of psychology at work at this time in history because of the mindsets of people. So we know we have World War I. Excuse me. The whole world is devastated. They're trying to rebuild. We start to have the credit and debit system. So, we have the stock market. And so basically, countries are lending money kind of willy-nilly in a way, you could say, because, it was lending money out on this false pretext that the stock market's never going to crash. This is a solid system. There's nothing wrong with it. And of course, we know that that's not the case. That's just not how anything in life works, right? And so, what we see with the Great Depression, which is, of course, the result of all of this I'm talking about as far as the economic side goes, we see that devastation down on the individual level more so in the ways that it affected men. So, during the Depression, we know that pretty much a third of society, they were living in. And they just said they were jobless, starving, and Germany that. So, that starts creating kind of these disgruntled feelings, this kind of scaredness and unsureness of what's going to happen. How are you going to take care of your family? So we see men hit the hardest because women were still a part of the workforce. That's kind of a misconception too. Women have always been a part of the workforce. In fact, with industrialism back in when it first began there, and the spice trades and all of that in the 1400s, even more so into the 1800s with the beginning of industrialism. Women were, the ones that kind of created that. Industrialism started with these cottage industries that were basically women sitting at home making stuff. They were making the cloths and the linens and doing the embroidery and whatever else anybody wanted. It was, mostly women doing that. And the reason that women weren't as affected by the Great Depression is because, of everything, we were still at a lower level than men, so they were making less than men, and they had probably like less desirable jobs, and then we have to add in World War I, and all the men going, the majority of people going off to fight are young men of working age. And so when they come back, there's really not a place for them in society. So that relates to psychology because at this time, too, we see Sigmund Freud come about in psychoanalysis. And so it's okay if you guys don't know anything about psychology. I know we're in a history class, but you'll see how I connect. You'll see the connection here in just a second. It's really, like I said, mindset, which leads to the actions that we take as individuals and collectively, right? So psychoanalysis is that typical view of psychology, no matter what movie, TV show, even book that you would read. It's the typical of somebody is sitting in a chair, and you come into their office, you lay down on the couch, and the psychologist says, tell me how you feel today, right? That's kind of, that's, of course, it's more complicated than that, but in a nutshell, hopefully that sparks images and you guys kind of have an idea of what I'm talking about here. Anyway, for Freud, he believed that the basis of human behavior, well, he believed that our brains were, broken up into our conscious mind, our subconscious mind, and our unconscious mind. And so the root of our behaviors lay deep, deep down in our unconscious mind. A lot of times people we stop at the subconscious. You hear people talk about, oh, your subconscious mind, but there's another layer underneath that subconscious mind, and that's where Freud thought that are the real source of our behaviors. Okay, and so he broke that basic motivations of behavior and just basically life in general. And those are the eros and the thanatos. And so, what that are, the eros is our death drive, our aggression drive. And the thanatos, wait, I just got those wrong. Sorry, guys. The thanatos is our aggression, death drive. And the eros is our kind of life sex drive. So that's why I say, sex and death, or sex and aggression are the two motivations for our behavior. And like I said, for all of life, because in order to live, you have to pre you have to reprocreate. There's the word. And then, it's kind of a typical, kind of the normal thing of this idea of kind of fight. Life is kind of chaotic. And in order to live, we all kind of have, and it's that way of how we view and manifest those conflicts is, really determines how we engage each other. Okay, so how does this relate back to history? It relates back to history because this idea of aggression and these gender roles that we assign in society. So to be male, to be masculine, you have to have the job, you have to be the breadwinner of the family. And this became more of a popular idea after World War II, but even before that, we've always kind of had these assigned gender roles. So, so basically, a lot of men felt they felt emasculated, they felt demasculine because of the way society was after World War One. So that kind of explains this kind of fervor and this excitement we see over these dictators power, because they kind of promise to restore manhood and make the man powerful again. And of course, they use women. They, especially the Nazis, they were really big on propping up women because of the other side of what Freud was saying, the eros, that sex drive. You can't have a perfect race and take over the world without people to do it with, right? So that's my point, is really this idea of masculinity too is really something that Mussolini played off of. And when we add in development and we look at the age group, young men and women, that time of adolescence, young adulthoods, when our brains are still developing, we're still kind of all hopped up on our hormones, and things are very exciting at that time, at those ages in life, right? And so when you step back and you look at those social contexts, we can see that appeal. Once again, these dictators, they didn't come in ruling with an iron fist and beating people upside the head at first. They came in being charming and charismatic, especially with Hitler. It's kind of was like the Beatle craze when the Beatles first came out, and we see these young adolescent girls that feigning and just just acting, just losing their minds over these concerts and seeing, the Beatles up on stage. That's kind of how people felt about, Stalin and Mussolini and Hitler. And so it was they were able to play off of that, is kind of what I'm saying. And so then what does that lead into? That leads us into looking at the other side, these dictators' personalities, and we see these very unique characteristics that make up what we would social personalities, psychopathic personalities. And basically, what does that mean? That means that, there are these people that are very charming and very charismatic, and they get people to do what they want. So then they can, essentially manipulate people for their own nefarious agendas. And that's exactly what we see at this point in history. And so, we see egos getting too big because they're giving in to those id pleasure principles. That's something else Freud, he said, we have that conscious, subconscious, unconscious mind, and then we also have our egos, our id, and our super egos. And so, our ego is always kind of fighting, but between those ids and, doing the right thing and the not right thing, right? And so when we have these leaders come in that, once again, they break us up and say, this is good and this is bad, that really, affects people in those eternal struggles with what is right and wrong. And then, when you desensitize people and say, this is what's right and wrong in the context of only human, is like, okay, we're going to look around and our groups are going to be the only ones that we call human, and everybody else is going to be not human. And, and therefore anything we do to them is okay. And, that's not okay. And it's hard to explain exactly why collectively in the past we have been okay with those types of ideas. But that's the good thing about going back and looking at history, is that, it's okay if we're not perfect and if we make mistakes. That's what, as Einstein said, the definition of crazy is doing the same thing repeatedly and always getting the same results. It's like, not changing. We can't go back and change history, but we can change how we are right now, because, history is separate from us, guys. We are all a part of it. And, essentially, that story of history, we all write some of it. And, it's not just these dictators coming into power. That's the scary thing. It's the fact of the appeal of how, as groups of people, we can be preyed on by these, these antisocial personalities. And so it's up to us to be more empowered as individuals. So, we make that collective stronger there. So, just a few pictures, guys. So once again, we kind of see this appeal. So when it comes to Mussolini, like I said, he was really big on that appeal of masculinity and that idea of restoring manhood to the Italian people. And we have to think about Italy specifically. Italy had a very strong Italy has very rich cultural history. A lot of what we do now, a lot of how society is set up, a lot of our arts and cultures, it's attributed to Italy, to the Roman and Greek cultures, to the Roman Catholic Church. A lot of those technologies and advances that they saw there in Europe for a while had to do with the control of the Roman Catholic Church, right? And so, that all was given birth in Italy. So, so Mussolini played upon that great Roman Italian heritage that they had. And that was his big tagline, was that, Rome has risen again, kind of, be like, we're coming back, we're taking over the world, we're going to show our greatness again. And so, we see he also had this as charismatic as he was also kind of strong fisted, the eye leader, because that's way anybody that because anybody, as charismatic and as much as people were infatuated and taken in by these leaders, there were the people, the voices of sanity. They're like, wait a minute, something's not right here. And that was kind of the horrendous thing about these dictators too, is that anybody that opposed them, they would just kill them. And as I've already said before, we know that Stalin was the worst about that. Stalin didn't even care, friend or enemy. He would kill you if he felt like, you would just, he didn't even care. His idea of communism was, if you have enough food to feed 1,000 people and you have 10,000 people, you just kill 9,000 of them. There you go. Problem solved. It's like, that's no way to solve. No. And so with this picture, we really get that feel of that enthusiasm that these leaders were inspiring. That fervor that they were creating in their countries. And of course, we really see that with the Nazi Party. And that's you see a lot of people in this picture with Hitler. And the main thing is that if you notice, young faces in there. Like I said, when we're at those pivotal adolescence and young adulthood, it's very easy to get worked up in those frenzies. And I'm saying that like it's a bad thing because of this certain period that we're looking at in history, but you got to think about things like the 60s and like the Vietnam movements, the end of civil rights. A lot of that was because of those age groups, the adolescents and those young adults. Why, guys? I guess that's just something as during that time of our development that those that we kind of have to go through. That's the time when we are most excited about wanting to make a mark on the world and to change the world. So so once again, we see that when we're looking at history and we're reading these stories, we're not removed from us. They're just stories about us and how we think and how we act and we behave, and in that we are all writing those stories, especially right now as we speak, because of we're kind of experiencing a similar things that our ancestors went through. We have this COVID-19 going on right now. We're having kind of economic problems. We're having problems of people not being able to feed themselves, not getting their basic needs met, and we know those are always the pivotal points in history. Have to realize that some kind of change has to occur, right? And I think if we look in the past, we that's what happened with these dictators. We were just that need to wanting change, that need of becoming adults and making a mark on the world. And here are these leaders that are promising these great and wonderful things to us. It's those snake oil salesmen, right? And that's where we have to remember our part in all of this to make sure that we don't see these kind of things repeat themselves. And I hate to say that history repeats itself because I really don't think it does. I think it's just that we sweep a lot of things under the rug and we don't really address them. It's like we bury them deep down into our unconscious mind so we don't have to think about them, and then they spark back up, and that's part of it. It's always going to until we're able to find those new ways to overcome those new solutions. I don't want to say overcome those problems because you have to look at life as there's never a problem in life. There's just always solutions. I forget who said that too. So just once again with this picture, we just see that fervor and that excitement that was being built up at the time, and all those false promises. And that is where we will end our lecture this week, guys. Just kind of with that idea of how the things that go on in the world, and history, are all a part of it. And maybe some of us will go off to be great names in history, so that we are put up there with all these other people that we talk about. And then probably the rest of us will just down at the bottom in the masses of in the masses, and working to keep that balance somehow, right? My point with that is that we have to remember that everything we do has some small action somehow. Every little thing we do is writing a part of history, and where that becomes more apparent is just how we engage others. And it's okay to have differences, and we I would talk about breaking us up into groups, and that us and them, and it's all right to see our differences. I think it's once again when because we have to see the beauty of that. It's when we look at those differences as being something that's not contributing to society. That's where we get into trouble, because there's a reason we're not all the same. Even if we look the same, we have the same belief systems, the same religion, the same culture, maybe even come from the same parents, we have the same family. We're still all individuals that have something to contribute to society, and it is something that's more on the positive and productive side, and not that destructive side like we see with the rise of fascism in Europe. So, all right, guys, let's just wrap up real quickly. I want to talk a little bit about your topic selection paper, and then just once again review a couple tips on academic writing and APA, because it's once we get it in our heads, it really helps make all of that so much easier, and you guys will see that it really frees up so much space in your brain for more of your voice and your critical analysis. All right, and that applies to not just your academic part of your life, but that applies to all parts of life, guys, and just going out in the world and how we engage anybody we accomplish in life, right? Or trying to accomplish in life, right? All right, guys. So when it comes to your topic selection, as you have hopefully already noticed, that at the end of class we have a final presentation where you are going to do a PowerPoint recording, and you can, and actually, as we move closer to that, I'll talk a little bit more about some of those different options, because if you want to do it in Zoom, you want to make a YouTube video, it doesn't really matter to me how you go about doing your video recording. It's just as long as you send it to me in a file format that I can get open. But like I said, we'll talk about that more later as we move on. So basically, with that final presentation, throughout class, we will be working on that. So this week, we start with the very beginning of just picking somebody that we want to talk about. And guys, you are as free and creative to pick whomever you like. The key there is just that as long as you have that academic, that historical data to back up what the person that you are talking about. So, I mean, if you want to pick a politician, you want to pick a president, you want to pick one of these fascist leaders, you want to pick somebody like, Gandhi, any leader that you can think of. You want to pick somebody that is an artist, somebody that has to do with culture and anthropology. Because I'm thinking Jane Goodall. She's of course my favorite person who inspires me my whole life. And she's done wonderful things with our understanding of what it means to be human, and then just living in the environment and with other species and animals, right? So if you want to pick a famous writer, famous journalist, it doesn't matter, guys. I want you to be comfortable and find somebody that I guess that's what I'm trying to tell you guys. Find somebody that inspires you. Find an historical figure that inspires you. And even saying that, it doesn't have to be somebody that's in the past and already dead. If you want to pick somebody who's presently living and making a impact on society, you can talk about them too. I say that because people have talked about Michelle Obama, and they've talked about Donald Trump. Who else? Those are the only two I can think of as far as present day. So you guys, you're free to pick whomever you want. And if you have any questions on that, guys, just you guys know that you can reach out to me. I am more than happy to help. So with your topic selection, a little bit about primary and secondary sources. So primary sources are dated sources. And that means is that they were written during that time period. So newspapers, speeches, diaries, those would all be primary sources, because because once again, because they were written at that specific time period. So like Winston Churchill's speech there, where he first talked about the Iron Curtain, if you reference that, that would be a primary source. Okay. Anne Frank's diary, that's of course the most famous historical diary we talk about, or um, that was written during the time that those events she was talking about were occurring. That's another way to look at it. The primary source was written during the time that whatever they're talking about, it was occurring. Secondary sources are written afterwards and based on that primary source. So it would be like a book review of Anne Frank's diary, a case study talking about Winston Churchill's speech, textbooks, journal articles. Those are all secondary sources because they're written after that primary source and they're kind of analyzing that primary source. Okay, guys, so hopefully that makes sense on those distinctions there. And in your topic selection, like I said, picking your historical figure, and you definitely want to try to find more of those primary sources as opposed to those secondary sources, because basically what you're going to do with that final presentation, it's going to be the story of that person. It's you telling that person's story, and it's always better to have their words to tell their story than somebody else's kind of interpretation of that. Make sense, guys? The library is a really good place to go look for sources, and under the library, Premier, which takes you to EBSCOhost, is a really good database to find primary sources on. If you need any help with that, guys, please don't hesitate to contact me about that. Okay. And then last, just remember, when it comes to those case studies, when it comes to, even with your discussions, you can kind of follow this formula of writing. So, basic essay, always those 5 paragraphs, your title page and your reference page. And, so you always want to think of it as like 7 pages, because when you say 5 paragraphs, we're really trying to, 5 pages. Of course, for the purpose of this class, you're just writing like 2 to 3 page essays. So I would say that. So think no more than 3 pages of your written essay, and then 5 pages altogether, because you want that title page. That is the first page, its own page. Essay starts on page 2, and then when you get down to your conclusion, you will scroll down to the next blank page and start your references there. All right, guys. So then, of course, that hang on, my dog fell. My dog, he's 17 years old. I've had him since he was about 6 or 8 months. And so he's an old man now. His hips don't work as well as they used to. And yeah, I have to help him up sometimes. So sorry about that, guys. So, like I said, the second page is where the essay starts. Remember those 5 paragraphs. It's going to be your introductory paragraph, 3 body paragraphs, and then your conclusion paragraph. So, in that introduction, you always want to state that thesis and give an overview of those main points of your paper. Now, best practice, I think, for me, guys, is that we tend to start at the top and then work our way down, right? But it's really hard to write paper yet. What I like to do is write that last, because then you have a good clear view of what all those main points are that you're talking about in your paper. If you start, you're not really going to know. Hopefully that makes sense too, but I think it does. So, once you start kind of in the middle of your paper, and then once you got all your information, it's easy to go back and summarize what you just wrote about, right? All right. So basically, with that thesis statement, it's just something simple and basic that alerts your readers to what that paper is about. So this week, you can write about Hitler, Mussolini, or Tojo. So you see in those examples, that's as simple and basic as you need it to say. It'd be like, this paper is going to look at Mussolini, rise to power in Italy. The purpose of this paper is to examine fascism in Japan. However you want to word that. You notice though that this paper will. The purpose of this paper is, that phrasing is the